Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been dealing with some health issues lately, and after months of my regular doctor telling me everything was fine, I finally convinced him to refer me to a specialist. The problem is, finding the right specialist has been a nightmare. I've been calling different offices, leaving messages, and waiting for callbacks that sometimes never come. So when my phone started ringing from an unknown number over the past week, I figured maybe it was finally one of those doctor's offices getting back to me. The calls always came at random times during the day. Sometimes in the morning while I was having coffee, sometimes right after lunch, and once even at 7 p.m. Each time I'd see the unfamiliar number and think maybe this was it. Maybe this was the cardiac specialist or the neurologist I've been trying to reach. But every single time I missed the call, there was no voicemail, just silence. I have a strict policy about not answering unknown numbers. Too many telemarketers, too many scams, too many people trying to sell me extended warranties for cars I don't even own. Both my health situation, I was getting desperate. I needed to find someone who could actually help me figure out what was wrong. And if that meant answering a few unknown calls, so be it. Today, when that same number popped up on my screen for what felt like the 10th time this week, I decided to bite the bullet and answer. I picked up the phone and said hello. The voice on the other end was smooth, practiced, like someone who made these calls all day long. The caller asked if this was my full name, which should have been my first red flag. Doctors' offices don't usually use your full name when they call. They usually just ask for your first name or say they're calling from whatever medical group. But I was hopeful, so I confirmed it was me. The caller introduced himself and said he wanted to talk to me about a house located at my exact home address. My stomach dropped. Not only did this person have my full name, but he had my home address too. This wasn't a doctor's office. This was something much worse. He launched into his pitch about tracking the real estate market in my area and being prepared to make me a cash offer for my property. He said they could close in 7 days, no inspections, no repairs needed, and they would handle all the paperwork. I'd heard enough. I knew exactly what this was. One of those predatory house buying companies that prey on people who might be in financial trouble. They offer way less than market value and pressure people into quick sales. I'd heard horror stories from neighbors who'd been approached by similar companies. I told him to lose my number. I didn't say it nicely. I was frustrated, worried about my health, and now some scammer was wasting my time with calls I thought might be important medical callbacks. His response shocked me. He called me a witch and then hung up on me. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Did this guy really just call me a witch because I didn't want to sell my house to his scammy company? I was already having a bad week, and now this clown thought he could insult me and just hang up. I called the number back immediately. It rang twice before he picked up. He answered like nothing had happened, using that fake friendly tone and introducing himself with Premier Property Solutions. He asked how he could help me today, like he was talking to a brand new potential victim. I told him how dare he call me about some scam and then call me a witch when I wasn't interested. I said I was going to report him to the State Real Estate Commission. His response was even worse than the first time. He called me a witch again and said he didn't know what I was talking about. Then he hung up on me again. I was furious. Not only was this guy running some kind of predatory business, but he had the audacity to be rude and disrespectful when people didn't want to participate in his scheme. Well, two could play this game. I spent the next hour on my computer, and he was about to learn what happens when you mess with someone who has time, internet access, and a serious grudge. First stop, the Church of Scientology website. They had a nice little contact form where you could request information about their services. I filled it out using his phone number, making sure to check the box that said prefer phone contact. In the section where they asked why I was interested, I wrote that I had been working in a scammy industry and felt I needed to get back on the right path and leave this way of life. Next, I found faith ministries online. They had a similar setup, a contact form for people seeking spiritual guidance. Again, I used his number and checked prefer phone calls. I wrote the same message about working in a scammy industry and needing to find the right path. Then I remembered all those pest control flyers I'd been throwing away. I found Orkin's website and signed him up for a free estimate. Phone calls preferred, of course. But I wasn't done yet. I found healthcare.gov and signed him up for information about health insurance plans. More phone calls headed his way. By the time I finished, I was feeling much better about the whole situation. He wanted to make unwanted phone calls and be rude to people. Well, now he was going to get a taste of his own medicine. About a week later, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to call his number one more time just to see how he was doing. The phone rang and rang before going to voicemail. But it wasn't the professional voicemail message he'd probably had before. This one was different. His voice sounded tired and stressed. He said that he wasn't available right now because he was dealing with some personal issues. He asked people not to call his number unless it was an emergency. It sounded like he had been getting a lot of phone calls lately. I wondered if the Scientologists had been persistent. I wondered if faith ministries had been calling him multiple times a day to discuss his spiritual journey. I wondered if Orkin had been trying to schedule that pest control consultation. I've been working in corporate analytics for about 5 years now. Started as a junior analyst fresh out of college, worked my way up to senior analyst, and honestly thought I was doing pretty well. I'm the type who keeps my head down, does good work, and lets the results speak for themselves. Maybe that was my mistake. Our department is pretty small, maybe 12 people total. We handle all the data analysis for the company's quarterly reports, market research, and strategic planning. It's demanding work, but I genuinely enjoy it. The problem started about 8 months ago when they hired someone new for a lateral position to mine. Let me tell you about Karen. She came in with this big personality, always volunteering for everything, always eager to be in meetings with the higher-ups. At first, I thought it was great. Finally, someone who could handle the political side of things while I focused on the actual work. The first time it happened, I didn't even realize what was going on. I had spent 3 weeks working on a comprehensive market analysis for our biggest client. I'm talking deep dive research, statistical modeling, trend analysis, the whole 9 yards. The night before the presentation, Karen offered to help me polish the slides. She noticed I'd been working really hard on the client presentation and asked if I wanted her to take a look at the final slides. She said she was pretty good at making things look executive ready. I was so buried in the data that I probably had missed some formatting issues, so I told her that would be amazing. She said no problem, promised to clean it up and send it over first thing the next morning. The next morning I got to the conference room and saw Karen setting up the projector. She was already talking to our department head when I walked in. When she saw me, she told our boss that I was her partner on the project and that we had worked really well together on the analysis. Our department head praised Karen, saying this was exactly the kind of strategic thinking they needed more of. I sat there confused. Partner? I had done maybe 95% of the work, but I figured maybe she was just being inclusive, trying to share the spotlight. After the meeting, our department head pulled Karen aside for a private conversation. I later found out she got assigned to lead the next big project. The second time was worse. I had spent a month developing a new forecasting model for our sales team. Complex stuff involving machine learning algorithms and predictive analytics. Again, Karen swooped in at the last minute. She told me the work was incredible and asked if she could add a few strategic recommendations to tie it all together. I said sure, that would actually be really helpful. But when the presentation happened, suddenly it was Karen's forecasting initiative and I was relegated to technical support. She got praise from the vice president. I got a polite nod. The third time I started to see the pattern. Karen would let me do all the heavy lifting, then add some surface-level executive summary points and present it as her own work. She was good at office politics. I'll give her that. She knew exactly how to position things to make herself look like the strategic mind behind everything. But the fourth time, that's when I decided enough was enough. We got assigned this massive project analyzing our company's market position compared to competitors. The kind of project that could make or break someone's career trajectory. I knew Karen would try her usual trick, so I planned accordingly. I spent 2 weeks doing legitimate research, building the framework, gathering data sources. Then I started working on the analysis itself. But here's the thing, I deliberately introduced some subtle flaws. Nothing that would be immediately obvious, but things that would fall apart under scrutiny. I made sure the sample sizes in some of my comparisons were too small to be statistically significant. I used outdated benchmarks for a few key metrics. I cherry-picked data from specific time periods that supported our company's position a little too perfectly. Again, nothing crazy obvious, but enough to make the whole thing unstable. Then I waited. Sure enough, 3 days before the deadline, Karen came knocking. She asked how the competitive analysis was coming along. I told her honestly that I was drowning. I explained that I had the research and most of the data work done, but I was running way behind on the executive summary and recommendations. She asked if I wanted to send her what I had so she could help pull it all together. I asked if she was sure and she said absolutely, reminding me that we were a team. I sent her my deliberately flawed analysis that same day. Then I completely stepped back. When she asked for clarification on certain data points, I gave vague responses and told her I was swamped with other urgent work. She was on her own. Karen threw herself into it. She spent the next 2 days creating beautiful slides, crafting executive-level language, and positioning herself as the lead on the project. She even scheduled the all-hands presentation without consulting me. The day of the presentation, I made sure to sit in the back. Karen was in her element, confidently walking through the analysis, highlighting key insights, making strategic recommendations. She was really selling it. Then our department head asked the question I was waiting for. He said the market share analysis was interesting and asked Karen to walk him through how she calculated the adjusted market penetration rates. Karen stammered that the methodology was fairly standard and mentioned using industry benchmarks, but she was clearly struggling. Our department head pressed further, saying he was looking at the source data and the sample sizes seemed pretty small. He wanted to know if we were confident these numbers were statistically significant. I watched Karen's face change. She started flipping through slides, looking for something that wasn't there. She said she could circle back on this specific methodology, but our department head wasn't done. He pointed out that some of the benchmark data was from 2019 and asked if we were sure these were still relevant comparisons. Karen said the research team had compiled the data sources and she could get more details. Then he asked the killer question, had she actually verified any of these data sources herself? The room got quiet. Karen was visibly flustered, stammering through non-answers. Finally, our department head suggested they table the discussion and revisit it later. He told Karen to get him a more detailed breakdown of the methodology by end of week. She said, of course, absolutely. After everyone filed out, I saw Karen frantically going through her notes, probably realizing for the first time that she had no idea how any of the analysis was actually constructed. Later that week, I got a call from our department head. He asked me to come see him because we needed to discuss the competitive analysis project. When I asked what was up, he mentioned that Karen had told him I did most of the underlying research work. He said he'd been going through the report and was finding some issues with the data integrity. He wanted me to help him understand what happened. I played it perfectly calm. I told him I could take a look and explain that I had pulled together most of the initial research, but Karen was leading the final analysis and presentation. He said he understood that, but since I understood the methodology better than anyone, he wanted me to quietly fix the issues and get him a clean version. I told him, of course, I'd prioritize it. I spent the next day creating a completely new, accurate analysis. Solid methodology, current data sources, proper statistical significance testing. Real work that would actually hold up under scrutiny. When I submitted the revised report, our department head was impressed. He told me this was exactly what they needed and said it was much more thorough and reliable than the first version. Karen never presented another one of her projects again. She stopped offering to help with my work. She barely makes eye contact in meetings now. And somehow I started getting invited to more strategy discussions with senior leadership. Our department head recently pulled me aside to discuss a promotion opportunity. Apparently, they've been impressed with the quality and reliability of my analysis work. Karen still works here, but she's back to doing her own projects. Turns out when you can't steal someone else's work, you actually have to know what you're doing. Who would have thought? I work as a night shift nurse at the local hospital, so I do most of my shopping during the day when it's quieter. I've been dealing with a lot of stress lately because my mom was recently diagnosed with early stage dementia, and I've been trying to balance work, taking care of her, and managing my own life. Shopping has become one of those mundane tasks that actually helps me clear my head. I was in the cereal aisle trying to decide between two brands of oatmeal for my mom when I heard the commotion start. At first, it was just typical kid noise. You know, the kind of whining and complaining that happens when children get tired or overwhelmed in stores. I didn't think much of it because, honestly, kids have meltdowns. It's normal. But then I heard the sharp crack of skin hitting skin, followed by a child's scream that made my blood run cold. I dropped the oatmeal boxes and hurried toward the sound. What I saw made me sick to my stomach. A woman, probably in her 30s, with bleached blonde hair and wearing yoga pants, was standing over a boy who couldn't have been older than 10. The kid was on the floor, holding his face, and she was raising her hand again. Karen started yelling at the boy, telling him that if he wanted to embarrass her and act like a little brat, she'd give him something to cry about. The boy was sobbing, trying to scramble away from her while begging his mommy to stop and saying he was sorry and didn't mean to do anything wrong. But she wasn't listening. She grabbed his arm and yanked him up, then slapped him again, this time so hard that he stumbled backward into a display of soup cans. That's when I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I shouted at her to stop what she was doing right now. She whirled around to face me, her face twisted with rage. She told me to mind my own business and that this was her kid and she'd discipline him however she wanted. By now, other shoppers had noticed what was happening. An elderly man with a walking cane was shaking his head in disgust. A young mother with her own toddler in a cart looked horrified and was already pulling out her phone. I told her that what she was doing wasn't discipline, it was abuse, and that you don't hit a child like that. Karen asked who I thought I was and whether I even had kids. She said I didn't know what it was like dealing with a spoiled brat every single day. The boy was still on the ground, trying to make himself as small as possible. His cheek was bright red, and I could see the handprint clearly. That's when I noticed this wasn't the first time. There were faded bruises on his arms. I told her I was a nurse and I knew what abuse looked like. I said this wasn't okay. Karen asked what difference it made that I was a nurse and said that didn't give me the right to tell her how to raise her kid. The young mother approached us with her phone in her hand. She announced she was calling the police because this was unacceptable. Karen called us all crazy and said the boy was throwing a tantrum and knocking things off the shelves. She asked what she was supposed to do. The elderly man told her she should talk to him like a human being instead of beating him senseless. More people were gathering now. The store manager, a nervous-looking guy in his 20s, came rushing over. He told Karen he was going to have to ask her to leave the store. Karen said fine and told the boy they were leaving. She reached down to grab the boy's arm again, but I stepped between them. I told her no, she wasn't taking him anywhere until the police got there. Karen said I couldn't stop her because he was her son. The young mother announced that the police were on their way and that Child Protective Services was coming too. That's when Karen completely lost it. She started screaming about how everyone was ganging up on her, how she was just trying to teach her kid manners, how we were all interfering with her parenting rights. But the more she ranted, the more obvious it became that this was about her anger, not about teaching the kid anything. The boy sat quietly on the floor, and I knelt down next to him. I asked him if he was okay and if anything hurt besides his face. He nodded, pointing to his arm where she grabbed him. He told me that she gets really mad sometimes, but that he wasn't trying to be bad. He said he just wanted the cereal with the toy in it. My heart broke. This kid was apologizing for wanting cereal with a toy in it. When the police arrived, Karen immediately tried to play the victim. She claimed we were all harassing her and that she was just disciplining her child like any responsible parent would. But there were too many witnesses, and the evidence was literally written across the kid's face. The police officer told Karen that they'd received multiple reports of child abuse and that they were going to need to speak with her and her son separately. Karen said this was ridiculous and that she wanted to speak to the officer's supervisor. The officer looked at the boy's face, then at Karen, then at all of us standing there. He told Karen she needed to understand that what multiple witnesses described went beyond reasonable discipline. When Child Protective Services arrived, they took one look at the boy and immediately began their investigation. They found more bruises, evidence of ongoing abuse, and the boy told them about other incidents at home. Karen kept screaming about her rights, about how she was going to sue everyone, about how we were all going to regret interfering. But when they led her away in handcuffs, charged with child abuse and creating a public disturbance, her threats fell on deaf ears. The boy went with a social worker, but before he left, he looked at me and thanked me for helping him. The store manager gave all the witnesses a discount on our groceries and thanked us for stepping in. The young mother and I exchanged numbers, and she told me she'd been in an abusive relationship herself and knew how important it was for people to speak up. I never found out exactly what happened to Karen after that day, but I heard she lost custody of her son and had to complete anger management classes and parenting courses before she could even have supervised visits. The boy went to live with his grandmother, who apparently had been trying to get custody for years. My little brother got diagnosed with leukemia 2 years ago when he was 13. At first, the doctors were optimistic. Chemotherapy, radiation, the whole 9 yards. We thought we caught it early enough. My parents sold their car to pay for treatments not covered by insurance. I took a gap year after high school to help take care of him while our parents worked double shifts. The treatments worked for a while. He had these periods where he seemed almost normal again. He'd draw for hours, creating these incredible cartoon characters and storylines. Animation had always been his thing, even before he got sick. He'd spend entire weekends watching behind-the-scenes videos of his favorite animated movies, studying how they brought characters to life. But then last month, the doctors delivered the news nobody wanted to hear. The cancer had spread. They gave him maybe 6 months, probably less. That's when the Make-A-Wish Foundation reached out. When they asked him what he wanted most in the world, he didn't hesitate. He wanted to meet Marcus Chen, the lead animator at Cloudburst Studios. Marcus had worked on some of the biggest animated hits of the past decade. My brother had followed his career religiously, collecting concept art and watching every interview he'd ever done. The foundation made it happen. They arranged for us to visit the studio next weekend. My brother was so excited he could barely sleep. For the first time in months, he had energy. He started drawing again, preparing questions to ask Marcus, researching everything about the animation process. That's when the trouble started. Our family had joined this support group for families dealing with childhood cancer. It was supposed to be a safe space where parents could share their struggles and kids could connect with others going through similar experiences. One of the regular attendees was this dad whose son had severe social anxiety. The kid wasn't sick, just really struggled with social situations and making friends. Somehow, word got out about my brother's wish. Maybe my mom mentioned it during one of the sessions. I don't know. But 3 days ago, this dad showed up at our front door. I asked him if I could help him with something. He explained that he was from the support group and wanted to talk to our family about my brother's wish. I let him in, thinking he wanted to wish my brother well or something. I called my mom from the kitchen, and she came to the living room looking confused. My mom greeted him and asked what brought him by. He told her he'd heard about the animation studio visit and said it was wonderful for my brother. My mom thanked him and mentioned that my brother was really excited about it. Then he dropped the bomb. He said that was actually what he wanted to discuss. His son had heard about it and had been really interested in animation lately too. He wondered if maybe my brother could pick something different for his wish, something that could be shared. The room went dead silent. My mom just stared at him. My mom asked him to repeat what he'd just said, clearly not believing her ears. He suggested that maybe my brother could choose a Disney World trip where both boys could go together. He explained that his son had such a hard time making friends, and this could be a great opportunity for him to bond with someone. I asked him if he was seriously asking my dying brother to change his make-a-wish so his kid could tag along. He said he wouldn't put it that way. He claimed he just thought my brother could be more considerate. He said his son deserved some happiness too, and frankly, my brother was barely out of bed most days. His kid could actually enjoy and appreciate something like this. That's when I lost it. I told him to get out of our house right now. He insisted he was just trying to help both children. I reminded him that my brother was dying, and this was probably his last chance to meet his hero. I asked how he could want my brother to give that up for his kid who just happened to like cartoons. He had the nerve to say that my brother had the power to make another child happy and we should think about what kind of legacy we wanted him to leave. My mom told him he needed to leave immediately. He said he was just pointing out that selfishness wasn't a good look for anyone. I physically walked him to the door and slammed it behind him. My mom was shaking. My brother had been napping upstairs and thankfully didn't hear any of it. But the guy wasn't done. A week later, he called my mom and said he'd been thinking about their conversation. He told her that my brother still had time to change his mind about the wish. My mom reminded him that they'd been through this already and the answer was no. He said his son had been crying every night since he heard about this opportunity and she could fix that. My mom told him that wasn't our responsibility. He repeated that my brother had the power to make another child happy and that selfishness wasn't a good legacy. My mom told him not to call again, hung up, and blocked his number immediately. Last weekend, we went to Cloudburst Studios. My brother was so weak he needed a wheelchair, but his eyes lit up the moment we walked through the doors. Marcus Chin spent 3 hours with him, showing him original concept art, explaining the animation process, and even letting him try some of the software. Marcus created a mini character based on my brother's drawings. It was this brave little warrior who looked just like him, complete with his favorite baseball cap that he wore to cover his hair loss. Marcus animated a short scene where the character was fighting off shadowy monsters with a magic pencil. My brother cried when he saw it. Happy tears. He kept saying it was the best day of his life. 2 days later, that same dad showed up at our support group meeting. He had the nerve to approach my mom and mention that he'd heard the studio visit went well. My mom simply said it did. He said he hoped my brother realized what an opportunity he'd wasted and that his son was still devastated. That's when another parent from the group, whose daughter had beaten brain cancer, overheard. She asked him if he'd just said that this child wasted his make-a-wish. He said he just thought my brother could have been more inclusive. She asked him if he was talking about a dying child's final wish and what was wrong with him. The whole room went quiet. Other parents started gathering around, and this guy suddenly realized he was surrounded by people who understood exactly what families like ours go through. The first parent told him he should be ashamed of himself. Another parent said she couldn't believe he would say that to a grieving family. He insisted he was just trying to help his son. The first parent asked him if he meant by taking away a dying child's dream and told him he needed to leave immediately. The group moderator asked him not to return. Apparently, several parents complained about his behavior, and it wasn't the first time he'd been inappropriate. My brother doesn't have long left, but he's been drawing non-stop since the studio visit. He's creating his own animated series starring his little warrior character. Marcus even sent him some professional animation supplies to help with his project. The guy with the entitled attitude found a new support group across town. Good riddance. I'm 27 now, and my life took a major turn when I was 20. That's when my dad died from cancer. It was brutal, watching this strong man who taught me how to ride a bike and helped me with my homework slowly fade away. He fought for 2 years, and I spent those 2 years watching him get weaker while trying to be strong for both him and my mom. After Dad passed, Mom was destroyed. She barely ate, barely spoke, and I was terrified I was going to lose her too. It took her about 3 years to even consider dating again, and honestly, I was relieved when she finally started going out with friends and seemed to find some joy again. That's when she met him. Her new husband seemed nice enough when she first introduced us. He's in his 40s, works in construction, and has this easygoing personality that somehow managed to make my mom smile again. I was genuinely happy for her, even if it felt weird seeing someone else make her laugh the way Dad used to. The guy has a 13-year-old daughter from his previous marriage. He and his ex-wife split custody 50-50, so every other weekend the kid stays with him. She's a good kid, quiet but polite whenever I've been around her. The whole situation seemed pretty normal and healthy. When Mom told me they were getting engaged last year, I supported her completely. I even helped plan some of the wedding details. Sure, it felt strange knowing someone else would be living in the house where I grew up, sleeping in the bed my parents once shared, but Mom deserved happiness. She'd been through hell watching Dad die, and if this guy could make her happy, then I was all for it. The wedding last Saturday was actually beautiful. It was a small ceremony with just close family and friends. Mom looked radiant in her dress and her new husband seemed genuinely happy. I even cried a little during their vows because seeing my mom smile like that again reminded me of how she used to be before Dad got sick. For a moment, everything felt right in the world. Sunday started off normal enough. We were all still at the venue, having a late brunch before everyone headed home. I was sitting with my cousin, who's 16 now but was only 7 when Dad died. We were looking through some old photos on my phone when she asked me something that seemed innocent enough. My cousin wondered if I was going to start calling my mom's new husband Dad now that they were married. I told her no, definitely not. I explained that I already had a dad and I was already an adult when this man came into our lives. I thought that was a pretty reasonable response. I mean, I'm 27 years old. It would be weird for me to suddenly start calling someone Dad when I barely knew him compared to the 20 years I had with my actual father. But apparently, someone overheard our conversation because within minutes, my mom and her sister were pulling me aside. And that's when everything went to hell. My mom said we needed to talk about something important. When I asked what was up, my aunt jumped in and told me I needed to stop bringing up my father in front of my mother's new husband. I was confused. I mean, I wasn't even talking about Dad in that conversation. I was just explaining why I wouldn't be calling anyone else Dad. I told them I wasn't bringing up Dad, that I was just answering her question about what I'd call him. But my mom insisted that I do bring him up and it was making her husband uncomfortable. When I asked how it was making him uncomfortable, my aunt said he was jealous, and it wasn't fair to him. This man was jealous of my dead father, the same man who sees his ex-wife every other weekend when they exchange their daughter. I pointed out that he was jealous of a dead man, but he was perfectly fine seeing his ex-wife twice a month. My mom said that was different, and I should know it. I asked how it was different, explaining that his ex is alive and they have an ongoing relationship because of their daughter, while my dad has been dead for 7 years. That's when my aunt really lost it and showed her true colors. She told me that she knew my dad was important to me, but he wasn't important to anybody else anymore. She said everyone else had moved on, and I needed to let go and stop talking about him because it was making everyone uncomfortable. I felt like I'd been slapped. Here was my own family telling me that my father, who raised me and loved me for 20 years, didn't matter anymore because it inconvenienced some man who'd been in our lives for barely 2 years. I asked if they were seriously telling me I couldn't mention my own father because it hurt some grown man's feelings. My aunt said yes, that's exactly what she was telling me. She called me selfish and inconsiderate. My mom backed her up, saying that he was her husband now, and his feelings mattered too. I asked what about my feelings? What about the fact that Dad was my father for 20 years? I wanted to know if I was supposed to just pretend he never existed. My aunt said I didn't have to pretend he never existed, but I needed to stop bringing him up all the time. She said it wasn't appropriate anymore. The thing is, I don't even bring him up that often. Maybe I'll mention something he used to say, or tell a story about something we did together, but it's not like I'm constantly talking about him. He was a huge part of my life for 20 years. Of course, he's going to come up in conversation sometimes. I tried to explain that I wasn't doing it deliberately to hurt anyone. I told them he was my father for 20 years, and sometimes I mention him when I'm talking to my cousin because she barely remembers him, and I want her to know what kind of man he was. My aunt said I needed to stop, that nobody wanted to hear about him anymore. That's when I started crying. Here were two people who were supposed to love and support me, telling me that my father's memory was basically worthless because it made some man uncomfortable. I said I couldn't believe they were asking me to erase my own father from my life. My mom insisted they weren't asking me to erase him, just to be more considerate about when and how I talk about him. I told them no, they were asking me to pretend he never existed, so her new husband didn't have to deal with the fact that she had a life before him. My aunt called me dramatic and selfish. I shot back that I was being selfish when he was a grown man who was jealous of a dead person. I asked how that was my problem. At this point, I was done. I told them both to leave me alone and walked away. I didn't speak to either of them for the rest of the day. I left the brunch early and went home, where I spent the rest of Sunday crying and feeling like I'd lost my family all over again. The worst part is that I keep questioning myself. Am I being unreasonable? Should I just never mention my dad again to keep the peace? But then I think about how wrong that feels, and I get angry all over again. My dad was a good man. He worked 2 jobs to support our family, coached my softball team, and taught me how to change a tire. He was patient when I was learning to drive, proud when I graduated college, and brave when he was fighting cancer. He doesn't deserve to be erased from my life because some man feels threatened by a ghost. I haven't spoken to my mom or aunt since Sunday. They've both texted me, but I'm not ready to deal with their messages yet. I know they probably think I'm being stubborn and dramatic, but I can't wrap my head around how they think their request is reasonable. What makes it even worse is that this man has never even asked me not to mention my dad. This is all coming from my mom and aunt, who apparently decided on their own that my father's memory was too inconvenient for their new family dynamic. I'm hurt, I'm angry, and I feel like I'm losing my mind. 7 years after losing my dad, I'm now being asked to lose him all over again, and I just don't know how to process that. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.